And so when your cortisol hits and you feel like, oh, everything's out of my control, this lowers the cortisol and gives you a chance to be able to respond thoughtfully. There's research from the Gottman Research Institute that says 96% of the time, how a conversation starts is how it's going to end. So if you start harshly, it's going to end harshly. Vulnerability breeds vulnerability. And vulnerability breeds trust.
Meet Maya. She freezes halfway down the hallway, gripping the stainless steel railing outside the conference room. In the meeting, she hears loud voices, one of them unmistakably David's. She was ready to walk into the meeting with confidence, but after hearing his voice, she feels her pulse pounding in her ears. Maya is the chief supply chain officer for one of the largest beverage manufacturers in the world. She's tough. She's analytical. She's steady through change. She keeps global operations running through every shortage and every storm. But this is something she's really struggling to navigate. The tension with David, a senior VP of operations. Where they once had a really wonderful professional partnership, it's now turned into a minefield. It all started a month ago over a disagreement on regional distribution redesign. He wanted fast cuts. She wanted a more measured approach. This disagreement went from one meeting to the other, to the point where every interaction was loaded. If there was a question, it felt like one taking a jab at the other. If an email was overlooked, it felt like it was intentional. Now, Maya, known for being very composed, very calm, noticed that she started snapping, withdrawing, reacting without thinking. And now it consumes her to where she's replaying every single conversation. She's so distracted that she's forgetting certain documentation. She's not following up the way she should. And she's not showing up prepared to meetings. Her team notices. Her peers notice. And she notices. Maya feels like she can't break free from this emotional spiral of reacting to things rather than responding. And what she really wants is to be grounded and confident, to be able to have difficult conversations, and to be the leader that she knows she can be. One who isn't fueled with stress and self-doubt. Today, I'm speaking with Darcy Luoma, Master Certified Coach, creator of Thoughtfully Fit, an expert on helping leaders navigate conflict with clarity rather than reactivity. Darcy teaches leaders how to pause, think, and act with intention, especially when emotions try to run the show. And I'm excited to hear how Darcy would help someone like Maya, who's a strong leader stuck in a cycle of avoidance and stress, to be able to reclaim her composure and rebuild her relationships. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. Darcy, one thing I learned about you I had to ask about was that you are a triathlete for over 20 years. Ironman, I saw in your background. And I had to ask about this because that requires so much commitment. Tell me that story of what got you into that.
Yeah. So I'll be this May will be my 28th season doing triathlons. I only missed one season when I had 16-month-old and was pregnant with number 2. And so I started in 1998 when my best friend Nancy called on a Thursday and said, I think we should do a triathlon this weekend. And I was like, what? Well, anyway, I was just crazy enough to say yes. And it was miserable and it was hard. And I was hooked. I was like, I can do better. I know I can do better. I loved being surrounded by people with energy who were, focusing on their fitness, all body sizes, all shapes, all ages. But that was sort of the first foray into it. And then from there, I really got hooked.
That's amazing. It's such a level of commitment. And I mean, with the work you do now and how you help professionals, are there things from those experiences that you bring with you into the work that you do?
Every day. There is so much overlap with regards to endurance and balance and flexibility and agility, all of that I use in my sort of triathlon fitness world that correlates and translates to how I show up in the professional world and how I coach and work with teams and leaders.
Yeah. And when you go through the experience of it, right? Because it's experiential of what you're referring to. I'm sure that's opening up new perspectives. So in other words, there's a difference, what I feel, and tell me what you think about this, from I read something in a book and I learn to, no, this is something I do physically and I gather life lessons. I gather lessons on how to lead others through the experience of it.
As a matter of fact, Jay, literally just this morning, I'm at Master Swim and the swim coach stops me halfway through the set and he said, Darcy, your catch on your swim is early. And so you're pulling before you're turning. And so you're not getting the right power. Oh my gosh, I am constantly learning and growing and improving. And one of the things that a premise that we hold and a value we hold is that when you're a leader, if you want to be more thoughtful in how you're leading, you need to train and practice. If you're a team, you don't learn how to build trust, how to have healthy conflict by reading a book. I mean, you might learn the principles, but just like you aren't going, if I ask any of your listeners and your super fans, how did you learn to ride a bike? Probably there's going to be very few who said they watched a YouTube video or they read a book on it. You got to get on and you got to experiential. You got to learn the balance. You got to fall. You got to get back up. It's the same thing with your organization, your culture, your team dynamics. You actually need to train and practice and it is experiential and learn and grow and then say, oh, my bad. I didn't mean to say that. And that, and you lost trust in me. How can we rebuild our trust? What can I do so that we can communicate better in the future?
Yeah. And I think that the problem so often people face with this is the discomfort that comes from the actions that you need to take. If we are always seeking that comfort and, pleasurable experiences and delightful experiences, we're never going to have any growth in our lives. We're not going to ever have a challenge that we learn to overcome. And I mean, you've trained this in you as a triathlete. It's something that you physically do. You love the challenge. So I guess what would you say to people who have that hesitation to take that kind of action, to make it experiential because of the fears that might be holding them back?
I literally practice and get better. So we had hired a vendor a couple of years ago and the story doesn't matter, but I was very disappointed in the service he provided. And so I reached out and said, hey, I wonder if we can have a conversation. And I just said, Chris, here's what, I was, grateful and here's the things I liked and here's what I was disappointed. And here's what I'm wondering if we can figure out how to make it right. So, and we did, and it all was great. And after the engagement was done, he said, Darcy, I have never seen anybody that comes so easy to have conflict. Like you had that tough conversation and I didn't get defensive. I didn't shut down. I was like, I leaned in. I wanted to figure out, it was a blind spot for me that I had done something inadvertently that made you not happy. And you just, how were you born that way? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I am the most conflict averse person that there is. Like, I learned this the hard way because I know what it's like when you don't lean in. When those elephants in the room, you step over them and tiptoe around them. And then you go have post-meeting meetings, with someone else instead of the direct conversation and triangulation and the resentment and the anger and all that creates. I'm like, it's a lot better when I go have the conversation. Not unlike I say, I'd rather have pain that comes from working out than pain that comes from not working out. There's a choice.
Right. And I feel like it becomes something you notice more with practice. So I feel like I'm similar to you. I've always been a people pleaser. I always refer to myself as a recovering people pleaser. And so
I love that.
And so having that natural tendency to want to please people makes it very difficult for me to address conflict. I often would just avoid it. But I think with practice over the years, I notice when I feel it. Like I notice when it's like, all right, this is something I feel like I should be saying, I should address directly, and or my natural tendency would be to avoid that.
Mm-hmm.
I go, all right, that's the sign. Go, do it. Don't wait. Just jump in. Do you feel like it's, I don't know, is it something that you feel within yourself? Is it like a sensation that comes up? Is it like, what's the signal for you to say, you know what, I can't put this off. I got to go do it.
Yeah, it is now, but it didn't used to be. And I love, Jay, that you're talking about your awareness is the first critical piece to action. And so in our model that we use when we're working with leaders and teams called Thoughtfully Fit. And it's all about, if you want to handle yourself thoughtfully in the workplace, you need to train and practice. Just like if you want to be physically fit, you need to train and practice. At the core of the model are 3 simple steps. You pause, think, and act. And I think that's one of the things I've trained myself to do is, okay, instead of, my default is action, go, what's next? And when I wasn't pausing and thinking and just acting, it ended up in regrets instead of results, frankly. And so I think that's one of the things where you've trained yourself to pause and to think, what am I noticing? What doesn't feel right here? What's hard? And then with the awareness you're having from realizing there's some conflict, I need to not lean into my people pleasing. But the great thing is that's your superpower. So you've got that. That means when you go and act, you're not going to come out of the gate and do something you regret, because you're going to share your frustrations in a way the other person can hear it. Because we all fall along that spectrum of conflict. Some are conflict averse people pleasers, keep the harmony at all costs. Other people are aggressive. They grew up with 8 kids at the dinner table. And if you don't speak up, you don't get heard. And both, wherever you are on that spectrum, it requires some practice and training so that you can show up thoughtfully in whatever the situation is.
I appreciate the word training. You said training myself, because it is training. It is practice. And I do have your book right here, Thoughtfully Fit, for those on YouTube. And I was reading through some of it, and it seems like the training that you did on yourself became really necessary for what ended up being what you describe as a rock bottom moment. Would you be open to sharing what that experience was like for you, and how the Thoughtfully Fit model helped you to work through it?
Yeah, absolutely. I spent my first 20 years in my career in politics. And when I retired, the senator, I was running U.S. Senator Herb Kohl's office for 12 years, and he announced he was going to be retiring. So when I shut down his office on January 2nd, 2013, and January 3rd, I launched my training and coaching consulting business. And I was married at the time with 2 young daughters, and talked through with my husband that the majority of small businesses fail within the first 2 years. So if we're going to do this, I got to go all in. And he's like, yeah, go all in. And so, thankfully, he was home full time with our daughters. He handled the Girl Scout cookies, the 4-H, the haircuts, the dentist appointments, the breakfast, the lawn, everything. And that allowed me to really focus on building my business. 3 years in to that, I was actually at an event, Jay, and I got a phone call from my neighbor. And I thought, well, this is weird. It's 2 p.m. And for some reason, I decided to step out and answer it. And she said, Darcy, what is going on at your house? I'm like, I'm not at home. I don't know why. And she said, there are 50 police cars and a SWAT team with guns and officers surrounding your house. And they just took John out barefoot in handcuffs. And I was like, wait, what? My husband? What are you talking about? That started, my rock bottom. I found out, the detective called next. I found out that he was arrested. My husband was arrested for sexual assault of a 15-year-old. And it was the day before our 10-year wedding anniversary. He was put in jail and never came home. He was in Dane County Jail for, I don't know, a year and a half, and then was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. And so, that beautiful lifestyle that we had designed that allowed me to focus on my business, all of a sudden now was, turned upside down completely. And my daughters had never gone to bed without their dad tucking them in. So dealing with the emotions and the trauma of that, and finding the right child psychologist, dealing with my own emotions and trauma, dealing with my business, the search warrant, they confiscated all of my computers. I worked out of a home office. It was insane. Here's what's crazy, Jay. 5 days before his arrest, we had finalized the Thoughtfully Fit model that we had spent years researching and developing, and I was testing it in my own life. And so I became ground zero, like in the biggest challenge of my life, to test drive this model to help me through this, nightmare.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Darcy. That must have been so hard on you, on your daughters. And we talk about how we handle those micro moments of a little bit of conflict here or there. This is something that was a much bigger event. It was, I'm sure, really caused an emotional, disruptive type of reaction. So what do you feel was like your savior through all of this? Like what do you feel like was the thing that really helped you to be able to work through the emotions that came with this experience?
I don't want to overly simplify it, but I'm going to give a simple answer, and then happy to go deeper because there were layers and layers of complexities. But when I say, you train on the small stuff so that you are strong enough, you want to get fit. You don't start with a marathon. You start with a 5K. And you don't start by running a 5K. You start by jogging 4 blocks and walking home. And the next day you jog 6 blocks and you walk home, and you build up your fitness and your resilience. Because I had been training and building up that resilience muscle, pause, think, act. Okay, I get an email and I'm like, God damn it. And I pound out a response. Oh, okay, I know that doesn't work well. I've done that rodeo before. Pause. Okay, think. What do I control here? What's happening with this other person? Why am I getting so defensive? What are my choices? And slow it down, and then rewrite the email and act from that place of awareness. Because I had done so much micro training on these small things, when this big, huge obstacle came in my life, I was able to lean back on that training and to pause and think. So can I ground it in one small example, Jay?
Please. Yes.
I think it was maybe 3 days after my husband's arrest. And I realized it was Sunday that my girls had to go to school the next day. He was arrested on a Thursday. And that I had a leadership retreat to be facilitating, and I had to leave before they had to get in the school bus. Now, I've never had to worry about breakfast and lunches and school bus and all that. So I called a friend of one of my daughters to say, is there any chance that you can help out here? Could I bring the girls over tonight? Because at this point, it was all over the media. I mean, there were trucks out front. It was, it was the news story. And she said, Darcy, I need to know first, did you have anything to do with this? And the vitriol in her voice. I mean, this was my friend. This was somebody, I was like, I was so taken aback. I was so shocked. I was angry. I was like, oh my God. But in that moment, instead of like lashing out, I was able to pause and think, okay, you know what? She's scared. Her daughter has been at our house a lot under my husband's supervision. This isn't personal. She's in mama bear mode. And so I was able to act then in that moment and say, oh my gosh, no, I had no idea. I was as blindsided as you. And then he said, well, let me tell you, Darcy, if I find there's any pictures of my daughter, I'm going to send the mafia to your house. And my husband has ties to the mafia. And again, it was like, what? This is not my life. I follow the rules. Like what, and again, pausing in that moment to think and not overreact and not scream back and be like, are you kidding me? And just say, I get it. I get it. You're scared. I'm scared too. That was an example where had this happened 10 years earlier, before I had been practicing and training this muscle, this core, it would have looked very different.
Yeah. What a powerful example of those three steps: pause, think, and act. When you think about how someone trains to, let's say, pause, are there certain things that someone can do to really build up that muscle? Because I think that someone needs the awareness of it, especially when we're in a world where there's so much stimuli, it's just reaction. What are the ways in which you encourage people to build up that skill of pausing?
Yeah. So some people are naturally good at it. We all have a default mode. Some are really good at pausing. Their default is to think and analyze. Some superpower is to act. And when we have a strength taken to the extreme, it becomes a weakness. So if those people who, are good at pausing, pause too long, it ends up in a 5-hour Netflix binge. If you're good at thinking and analyzing, but you overthink, you get analysis paralysis and you ruminate. If you're good at acting, taken to the extreme, you react impulsively. Yeah. And you have regrets. So if your default is not to pause, that's hard. One of the things that a tool that I'm gonna share for those of you who are watching, you can see it. For those of you who are listening, I'm gonna describe it. If you put up one hand, kind of like in the shape of an L, almost like my daughters would do, like a loser in front of your forehead. Take your thumb and forefinger of your other hand and pinch the webbing between your thumb and forefinger. And as you pinch, breathe in and out and count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Or you count to 13, or you count to 63, depending on how worked up you are. And the benefit of this is a framework. This is a structure that can help you remember to pause. I use it all the time. You can do it, right now on my lap in a Zoom room. It's very stealthy. And the bonus is that it's a reflexology point. And so when your cortisol hits and you feel like, oh, everything's out of my control, this lowers the cortisol and gives you a chance to be able to respond thoughtfully. So that pause pinch is, I think, one of the, easiest ways in the moment to remind yourself to pause.
I love this. I was doing it with you. For those who are just listening, they didn't see it, but I was doing it with Darcy. I like that it's so actionable. It's something I physically do. I incorporate the breathing with it, and it could be trained, because if you just say, okay, this is my intention for the day, I'm going to use this specific technique to improve my ability to pause and tap into a bit more stillness. I just have to remember, and my hands are always with me. I'm never without my hands. So all I have to do is just do this. And I like that it's so stealth. Like you said, I could do it without anybody noticing. You're in a meeting.
You can do it in the car when you're driving.
Yeah. I was just imagining, like Maya in the story, right? She's in a meeting where she hears something that upsets her. It was David, I believe, right? David was in the meeting with her, and David said something. Rather than her react, she just can without anyone noticing, subtly grab that little space on her hand as a means to help her to pause before she jumps out and blurts something that she later regrets.
Yes. Yeah. And in that story, that vignette that you shared, that was one of the things that she was frustrated with, is that she found herself snapping and reacting without thinking. And so that pause pinch can sort of be just, and it can be a beat. It doesn't, I mean, it could be longer, but it could just be that beat to slow it down so that you don't have an autopilot knee-jerk reaction that you regret.
So effective. There's so many different things I've heard. I've never heard that one specifically. I really like that one. I've heard things like bring your attention to your toes, and you notice how your toes feel. And so I've used that one in the past where I just noticed if my toes are cold or warm, or just something to bring my attention to a part of my body to help me to pause. Now, that second stage of think, what are the things that you would say people could think about, or
Yeah.
I don't know if there are questions that you encourage people to consider, or frames of mind to think from, because a thing could be anything, right? So how do you encourage people to think through things after they've done that pause part of the framework?
Yeah. And you just nailed it with probably without even realizing it. The best way to think is ask questions. It's my number one tool as a coach. When I'm coaching leaders and teams, I ask questions. It creates new awareness. And so I have 2 questions that I can offer as a starting point, but any question that gives you new awareness and helps you think. One is, what are my choices? A lot of times when something happens, we don't think we have a choice. Well, he just criticized me. I have to defend myself. Well, that is one option, and there are other choices. And then the second question is, what do I control? Because a lot of times when something happens, we feel everything that's out of our control and we start to spiral. And so just recognizing, okay, yes, I don't control the fact that she just threatened me with sending the mafia, but I do control how I respond in this moment. And I do control whether I can access my empathy to recognize she's scared. So, but any question, and with Maya, she might, and again, the questions can be for yourself to think, and then sort of like master's level, PhD level is to ask the other person some questions. So she might think for herself, like, okay, what do I need in this relationship with David? It used to work. Where did it go south? What happened? What would it look like if we were both able to honor our individual personalities and use those to our greatest strength instead of those differences creating annoyance and frustration? And then she could ask David some questions. What are you frustrated about with our dynamic right now? What did it look like when we used to really jive? What was different then than now? What's your greatest hope? What's your biggest fear? What's your biggest frustration? All of those questions can help both parties to think and have some new awareness.
What I appreciate even about the line of questioning you went through in that example that you gave of your neighbor was questions that led you to empathize with the neighbor. Rather than only questioning things related to yourself, you kind of got out of your own stuff. You got out of your own self-absorption, and you started to then think about, okay, what is she going through? So do you find that it's really valuable to get yourself out of just thinking about you here and into thinking about what that experience must be like for the other person?
Yes, absolutely. You named it. So we have a tool that we use when we're helping people to have tough conversations. Can I just give a little overview of the framework in case that's helpful?
Yes, please. Would love to hear it.
Yeah. So it's called the message triangle that we use, and it's 3 C's. So I came from politics, and it helps you to really stay on point when a lot of times people are nervous and they're going to go have a tough conversation and then they avoid it and they don't actually say what they need to say. Or the people who are on the other end of the extreme that we talked about earlier, who are just aggressive and they say exactly what they want to say, and the other person shuts down and they don't even hear it because they just feel attacked. So there's 3 C's. And I'm going to name them and I'll explain it. Courage, compassion, and curiosity. So you have to have the courage to be able to say, here's what I'm thinking. Here's how I'm feeling. Here's what is my perspective. Here's what's frustrating. Here's what's hard. You need to do that with compassion so the other person can hear it and receive it. So in other words, there's research from the Gottman Research Institute that says 96% of the time, how a conversation starts is how it's going to end. So if you start harshly, it's going to end harshly. Whereas if you have a soft startup, I'll give you an example. You're going to go on vacation and you get home from work and you start yelling at your spouse, like, I can't believe you didn't put the garbage out. We're leaving. And now it's going to be sitting here for 2 weeks. Harsh startup. You can imagine where that goes, right? There's criticism and blaming and defensiveness versus soft startup. Hey, honey, I'm feeling frustrated because we're leaving on vacation and you told me to take the garbage out. And now I'm worried that it's going to stink or that people or robbers are going to come or whatever it might be. And you can see with that softer start, she might say, it was Labor Day on Monday, so I asked the neighbors to come and take it out tomorrow. Or who knows what the situation is, but you at least can see a version of that conversation where it can get to resolution. And then the third C is curiosity. And this is what sparked it, Jay, when you said you're almost able to enter into that empathy. Compassion is also being able to understand someone's perspective. And then curiosity gives you the tool to ask, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? How are you receiving this courageous message I'm telling you? What's happening from your perspective in our dynamics? That might be with Maya and David, that she finally gets the courage to say, hey, David, I wonder if we can talk about our dynamics. And she sets it up with compassion. I really like working with you and I have a great deal of respect for you. And I'm noticing that I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling like I'm snapping. I'm not the best version of myself. I'm wondering, how are you feeling about our relationship? What do you wish for? What is frustrating to you? And you can see where that courage, compassion, curiosity, wash, rinse, repeat is a structure to help you lean in to what we're talking about. A theme really today of our conversation, Jay, is like tough relationships, tough conversations, conflict.
Yeah. There's so much just from the way you framed that in how Maya could approach David that I could ask you about, because what you started with was kind of a, hey, can we talk about this? Just address it in a way where you're inviting the person to say yes or no to, can we have this conversation, right? And of course, I think David would say yes, most people would. And then it was around the examples, I'm noticing, but then you brought in, I'm feeling. And I thought that was interesting, which is something you often don't see people do in the workplace, right? To acknowledge vulnerably, here's how I'm feeling. Yeah. And I'm curious as to why you think that would be so effective. Why is that so effective to be able to share vulnerably how one is feeling with the other person, even the other person who is you're in conflict with?
Yes. Bingo. And I'm so glad you noticed that and highlighted that, Jay, because vulnerability breeds vulnerability. And vulnerability breeds trust. And so when I'm coaching leaders or teams, a lot of times there's a tendency when there's conflict to put the wall up and to be guarded and to sort of play it safe. And, and then unfortunately, it's harder to access that compassion. It's harder to access that empathy when someone has their wall up and they're just throwing bombs versus when they're saying, I'm feeling really frustrated. I'm feeling really sad that we are not having the relationship that we used to have. That opens the door for then David seeing the humanity, seeing the vulnerability to soften and to say, I have felt frustrated. I have felt, right, and whatever his experience is.
Yeah.
So it is critical.
And I really hope people listening really internalize how that is something for you to do proactively, meaning if we hear that and go, yes, the other person should do that. we're approaching this wrong, right? But because you know how sometimes it goes like that? Like we listen to something and we're like, yeah, that's how, that person should be doing this more. It's like we think about them doing it. What, Darcy, I'm hearing from you is, no, take full ownership of this. Be the one that has the courage to speak this way and share how you've been feeling. Don't wait for the other person to do this. Be the one who has the boldness to initiate that conversation.
I would be a billionaire, Jay, if I had the skill. When someone comes into a coaching conversation, I say, what would you like coaching on today? And they say, well, I want to figure out how I can get Jay to not be an or I want to figure out how I can get my boss to listen better, or how I can get somebody else to be different. You can't. You have no ability to change them. What you do have is the ability to look at what's my role and how can I influence how they show up in the relationship. And how do you influence it? It's by how you show up and what the invitation is. And it might even be saying, I realize, David, I need to confess, I'm frustrated and I want you to change. I'm realizing like I want you to behave differently. And I know that's not the recipe for us to figure out how to go from here. That's really vulnerable. You might be able to name it, that I'm frustrated that when you come in, you want to just get things done. And I feel like we need to analyze and create a plan and really be thoughtful. And I hate that about you, and I'm frustrated, and I don't want to hate that. And I don't want to be frustrated because you're brilliant. And I know that your ability to execute is so important. What I feel is missing is my ability to be analytical. So I'm wondering, how can we marry the two so that we can find the win-win? Because I know when we work well together, the strategy is better, the execution is better, the results are better.
And Darcy, what I'm hearing from you is this brutal honesty. That's what you're saying, right? It's being brutally honest about your experience, being brutally honest about what you're noticing of how you're reacting to the other person, and then having the courage to be able to tell them your truth. And when you deliver it, the way you just delivered it now didn't sound very confrontational. It actually sounded very respectful. It sounded very considerate of the other person, because you said, I don't want this. So in other words, how you deliver the message really does matter, is what I'm hearing from you too, Darcy, right? Like, in other words, like, you have to be careful that if you are going to share this with someone, you don't want to do so where you're overly emotional and you're crying tears or anything, nor do you want to be really matter of fact and just harsh to the other person.
100%. And so, I'm a little bit of a self-help addict, leadership junkie. I read every book, every podcast. I just love it. Probably a lot of your listeners have read Tough Conversations, Crucial Conversations, Fierce Conversation, fabulous books. I've read them. They're fabulous. And who wants to go have a fierce, tough conversation? So we call it balanced communications, where you balance what you want and need with what the other person wants and needs, where you balance courage with compassion, where you balance curiosity with curiosity with courage. Got all tongue-tied there. It's all about balance. It's how do you balance and find the win-win, instead of, I'm going to tell you how I feel. I win, you lose. Or, you know what? It's okay. I'm not going to say anything. I lose, you win. But, well, in the short term, that might work. But in the long term, it does not. Trust me, it creates resentment.
And there's a sense of knowing that the other person is important. Like, you're important and they're important. It isn't, I'm more important than you or you're more important than me. We're both important and we both have needs, and let's talk them through together. And, it's definitely a challenge for people to do this. I do think one of the aspects of it is overthinking. You were saying how some people have the strength of thinking, how that can backfire as they overanalyze. And I think in Maya's story, she replayed the conversation over and over and over again. How do you recommend somebody working through that? Where like, okay, it's gripping them so much, Darcy, that they can't stop thinking about it. It's affecting how they feel when they go home. I mean, yes, we talked them through how to have that conversation, but how do they deal with it when they're still feeling distressed over it?
Yeah. I would ask some questions and get really curious. So Maya, what's your biggest fear? A lot of times when we ruminate, we are catastrophizing. We're thinking of the worst case scenario. And by getting curious and asking, what's your biggest fear? And then this is a bonus tip. Build in that fear into your soft opener in the conversation. So she might say, my biggest fear, the reason I haven't said something is because I'm afraid David's gonna shut down. I'm afraid he's gonna tell me he doesn't want to work with me. I'm afraid it's gonna escalate. Whatever her fears are, I don't know. So once you identify your fears, build that into your soft startup. Hey, David, I'm wondering if we can have a conversation. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm really, I've been ruminating a lot on this. And my fear is, I really want to share with you how I'm feeling. And my fear is you're going to shut down. Or my fear is that our awesome partnership that we had in the past, that it's going to dissolve. Or my fear is that you're going to get defensive when I speak my tough truth. And my hope is that you will hear in my bringing this forward that I want us to work through this and to get to a place where we both get to be who we are in our brilliance and our difference, diverse, unique styles, and sort of be more effective in how we're communicating instead of having the conflict shut us down. And so when you can identify, if you're ruminating and really, I mean, that's just one tip. Identify your fears, build that in, and then build on it in that opening conversation to, this is my fear, and here's my hope.
And then here's my hope. I like the way you create the bridge there. Start with, here's my fear and here's my hope. I feel like, Darcy, everyone needs this training. I think everyone does. I think this could apply to so much. I could apply to parents, how you speak to your children, your spouse. I mean, so much of life, right? If we learn how to address perceived conflict, we will be happier, we will align better, and we'd avoid so much wasted time and energy.
Yes. Yeah. And in the scenario with Maya and David, what was interesting that you outlined is, she's normally calm and intentional, but because of the dynamics of what was at play with David, she found herself snapping.
Yep.
Reacting without thinking. She also found herself withdrawing.
Yeah.
And, when you are aggressive or withdrawing, neither of those are going to get the best out of the relationship. And so, yes, you are so right, Jay. This can be used in every situation, every relationship, whether it's your kid, your spouse, your neighbor, your colleague, your boss.
And what I think is also interesting too would be with Maya getting curious as to why it's triggering her so much. So in other words, when we get triggered, Darcy, it's an opportunity to learn something about ourselves. There's something's being revealed that if we really take the time to go through your model here of pausing and thinking, not only will it help us to be able to handle and respond to the situation well, but we also get to learn a little bit about ourselves. Like, this really triggered me. I wonder where that's coming from.
Brilliant. Absolutely. To get curious and think about that. So he's pushing for fast cuts. She wants measured transition. She pauses to think about what's triggering me. She might realize, like, oh my God, I got fired from my last job because I didn't execute fast enough and I got scared. And who knows, whatever it is, but she might realize, I grew up with a dad who was always pushing and it just shut me down. And then he left and abandoned me, or who knows what. But when you get that new awareness, then you can act more thoughtfully.
Exactly. And Darcy, I'd love for you to imagine a scenario where you met Maya. Let's say you were doing some coaching for this group and you were having some conversations. And then afterwards, Maya pulls you to the side and she tells you a little bit about what she's going through. You listen, you acknowledge what she's working through. Now, you mentioned a question that you would ask her a moment ago, what are your fears? Yeah. That could be a good place to start. Or maybe there are some other questions that you'd consider asking her. What would you ask her and why?
I have 100 questions. I mean, so depending on what her energy was and how open she was, would determine where I'd start on the array of questions. But some of them might be like, I hear that you're frustrated. What's frustrating you? I sense that you're angry. What are you angry about? And really mirroring back and getting curious about the emotion she's feeling. It seems like you have gone from lashing out to withdrawing. What triggers when you lash out and when you withdraw? And what would you want to do instead? What would be a different response? So just asking lots of questions to help her get some new awareness.
I love that. To be able to take inventory, like slow it down. The way you were asking her, it's like looking at it frame by frame of a movie, right? It's like slowing it really down and then saying, what would you hope? To be able to then design the kind of response that you would prefer to have. I love it, Darcy. And for anyone listening, if you want to learn more about the great work Darcy is doing, it's darcyluoma.com. I'll spell that out, DarcyLuoma.com. And you will have a webinar going on February 25th. And it's very much about the topics that we've been talking about. It's called Leading a Business Together Without Losing Your Minds. And that's going to darcyluoma.com/webinars. And people can learn more about that. Tell me a little bit about it, about what they can expect in that webinar. I mean,
the example you set up for our conversation today with Maya and David is a perfect example of the scenario of that webinar. What we're going to be doing, it's free. You can come, sign up. Is looking at whether it's co-founders, whether it's a visionary and an integrator, business partners. Maybe you run a business with your spouse. Maybe it's two VPs that are butting heads like David and Maya, whatever it might be. What gets in the way of having alignment, of having healthy conflict, of being able to communicate effectively, of being able to have trust, have shared accountability? And we're going to, because a lot of times exactly the scenario I couldn't have set it up better. You start the business or you work together, partners, and everything's great. And then all of a sudden you're pulling your hair out and losing your mind because they're so frustrating because you're in the storm. So the webinar is going to be given some tools to, just like today, to build on what do you do if you're in that place.
And there isn't a person in the world that wouldn't benefit from that. There really is. And how we deal with people matters so much. And I highly encourage anybody listening, you need to go to darcyluoma.com/webinars. Join it. It's free. It's February 25th. Darcy, thank you so much for taking time today, sharing your personal story. And I gathered a lot from this conversation personally, and I'm going to be taking that with me beyond today's conversation. So I really appreciate you, Darcy. Thank you.
I love it, Jay. And thank you so much. Your ability to have just a really engaging conversation. I feel like we could talk for 3 more hours. I absolutely loved how thoughtful you are in preparing to make this an engaging conversation. And if I could just say one more thing, if you can't make it February 25th, we're going to record it. You go to that same darcyluoma.com/webinars. You can get the access to the recording if you're listening to this or watching it after February 25th.
Excellent. So great to know. Thank you so much, Darcy.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jay.
Darcy was so easy to talk to. You could tell she has so much experience coaching people. You could tell how much she really cares about wanting to help others. It really shined in that conversation. And I'm grateful that we were able to record that conversation. And I'm going to share with you what I believe are 3 insights and 3 actionable takeaways. The first of 3 insights: learn from experience. Learn from doing. We could read something in a book and it could be valuable. It doesn't substitute for doing the thing. It doesn't substitute for practice. So if you heard from this conversation, you want to be someone, or you found value in being able to have those difficult conversations and confront someone, practice it. Practice it. Start small and then build. The second insight, pause, think, act. Whenever we're experiencing some disruption, whatever it is, with conflict or anything else, pause first. Take a moment. Then think. Consider your options. And then go ahead and take an action. When you follow these 3 steps, you will respond with clarity, with composure, and also with consideration of the other person. Third insight, the 3 C's of the message triangle. They were courage, compassion, and curiosity. First, having the courage to be vulnerable and address something that oftentimes people avoid. Also, sharing how you feel, but to do so with compassion. Compassion for self and compassion for the other person, and then have that genuine curiosity to really find out from them how together we can improve the situation. Actionable takeaways. First of 3, number 1, practice pausing. She gave us a powerful example, the web in our hands, being able to press on that and breathe with it as a means to remind you to pause. She talked about how that's a reflexology point and it helps to reduce cortisol. I think it's one incredibly effective practice because it can be done without anyone noticing. There are other ways this can be done, but find a way for you to incorporate something like this to interrupt the pattern and remind yourself to pause before you react. Second, actionable takeaway, ask questions to create new awareness. She said that second part, pause and think. Think is asking yourself questions. Ask questions such as, what are my options? What are some different ways I can respond to this? The questions we ask invite us to think differently. It helps us to look at it from different angles. So be great at asking yourself questions. And then the third, actionable takeaway, acknowledge fear, share fear, express hope. Acknowledge fear. If you're feeling triggered by something, there's a fear there. There's something that you want to acknowledge in you. And then the second, express that. That could be, as she said, the soft opener. How you start the conversation is being real and honest about the fear that you have. And then express hope. Express hope for what you want out of that relationship. Any conflict, when handled this way, I promise you, will be improved. You will get to the other side of it. Join us on Friday's episode. I'm going to share with you some of my own techniques of how to communicate when there's conflict, how to handle oftentimes people who have big egos, how to be influential in those environments. And what I'm going to share with you are the things that I've personally practiced, as well as I've shared in my own coaching with people and seen great results from those who put these into practice. Remember, it's all practice. You have to do the thing. So if you're going to listen, I hope you come ready to apply. If you're someone who wants to be able to more effectively communicate, be more influential, advocate for yourself while also maintaining healthy relationships and maintaining great connections, then Friday's episode is one you don't want to miss. So until next time, thank you so much for listening.
And so when your cortisol hits and you feel like, oh, everything's out of my control, this lowers the cortisol and gives you a chance to be able to respond thoughtfully. There's research from the Gottman Research Institute that says 96% of the time, how a conversation starts is how it's going to end. So if you start harshly, it's going to end harshly. Vulnerability breeds vulnerability, and vulnerability breeds trust.
Meet Maya. She freezes halfway down the hallway, gripping the stainless steel railing outside the conference room. In the meeting, she hears loud voices, one of them unmistakably David's. She was ready to walk into the meeting with confidence, but after hearing his voice, she feels her pulse pounding in her ears. Maya is the chief supply chain officer for one of the largest beverage manufacturers in the world. She's tough. She's analytical. She's steady through change. She keeps global operations running through every shortage and every storm. But this is something she's really struggling to navigate. The tension with David, a senior VP of operations, where they once had a really wonderful professional partnership, it's now turned into a minefield. It all started a month ago over a disagreement on regional distribution redesign. He wanted fast cuts. She wanted a more measured approach. This disagreement went from one meeting to the other, to the point where every interaction was loaded. If there was a question, it felt like one taking a jab at the other. If an email was overlooked, it felt like it was intentional. Now, Maya, known for being very composed, very calm, noticed that she started snapping, withdrawing, reacting without thinking. And now it consumes her to where she's replaying every single conversation. She's so distracted that she's forgetting certain documentation. She's not following up the way she should. And she's not showing up prepared to meetings. Her team notices. Her peers notice. And she notices. Maya feels like she can't break free from this emotional spiral of reacting to things rather than responding. And what she really wants is to be grounded and confident, to be able to have difficult conversations, and to be the leader that she knows she can be, one who isn't fueled with stress and self-doubt. Today, I'm speaking with Darcy Luoma, Master Certified Coach, creator of Thoughtfully Fit, an expert on helping leaders navigate conflict with clarity rather than reactivity. Darcy teaches leaders how to pause, think, and act with intention, especially when emotions try to run the show. And I'm excited to hear how Darcy would help someone like Maya, who's a strong leader stuck in a cycle of avoidance and stress, to be able to reclaim her composure and rebuild her relationships. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Darcy was so easy to talk to. You could tell she has so much experience coaching people. You could tell how much she really cares about wanting to help others. It really shined in that conversation. And I'm grateful that we were able to record that conversation. And I'm going to share with you what I believe are 3 insights and 3 actionable takeaways. The first of 3 insights: learn from experience, learn from doing. We could read something in a book and it could be valuable. It doesn't substitute for doing the thing. It doesn't substitute for practice. So if you heard from this conversation, you want to be someone, or you found value in being able to have those difficult conversations and confront someone, practice it. Practice it. Start small and then build. The second insight: pause, think, act. Whenever we're experiencing some disruption, whatever it is, with conflict or anything else, pause first. Take a moment. Then think. Consider your options. And then go ahead and take an action. When you follow these 3 steps, you will respond with clarity, with composure, and also with consideration of the other person. Third insight: the 3 C's of the message triangle. They were courage, compassion, and curiosity. First, having the courage to be vulnerable and address something that oftentimes people avoid. Also, sharing how you feel, but to do so with compassion. Compassion for self and compassion for the other person. And then have that genuine curiosity to really find out from them how together we can improve the situation. Actionable takeaways. First of 3, number 1, practice pausing. She gave us a powerful example: the web in our hands, being able to press on that and breathe with it as a means to remind you to pause. She talked about how that's a reflexology point and it helps to reduce cortisol. I think it's one incredibly effective practice because it can be done without anyone noticing. There are other ways this can be done, but find a way for you to incorporate something like this to interrupt the pattern and remind yourself to pause before you react. Second actionable takeaway: ask questions to create new awareness. She said that second part, pause and think. Think is asking yourself questions. Ask questions such as, what are my options? What are some different ways I can respond to this? The questions we ask invite us to think differently. It helps us to look at it from different angles. So be great at asking yourself questions. And then the third actionable takeaway: acknowledge fear, share fear, express hope. Acknowledge fear. If you're feeling triggered by something, there's a fear there. There's something that you want to acknowledge in you. And then the second, express that. That could be, as she said, the soft opener. How you start the conversation is being real and honest about the fear that you have. And then express hope. Express hope for what you want out of that relationship. Any conflict, when handled this way, I promise you, will be improved. You will get to the other side of it. Join us on Friday's episode. I'm going to share with you some of my own techniques of how to communicate when there's conflict, how to handle oftentimes people who have big egos, how to be influential in those environments. And what I'm going to share with you are the things that I've personally practiced, as well as I've shared in my own coaching with people and seen great results from those who put these into practice. Remember, it's all practice. You have to do the thing. So if you're going to listen, I hope you come ready to apply. If you're someone who wants to be able to more effectively communicate, be more influential, advocate for yourself while also maintaining healthy relationships and maintaining great connections, then Friday's episode is one you don't want to miss. So until next time, thank you so much for listening.